Hello my friends and welcome, I hope you're doing fine, I hope you're doing great because we have some of the interesting news coming from the front line. So Ukraine goes on massive offensive in Zaporizhzhia direction, where even Russians confirmed the presence of the Ukrainian Special Forces HUR, that's the military intelligence, and according to their information, the fight is ongoing for Mali, Sherbaki and Sherbaki. Also, there are several of the attack vectors towards Kamensk. Plus, Russians themselves are saying that the presence of the Russian armed forces from Primorsk till Plavny is almost absent. So here they show even more pessimistic picture for themselves compared to some of the independent analysts or Ukrainian war maps. So Ukraine is definitely serious about this direction. Sorry about Cyrillic names, but those are the Russian maps and they use Cyrillic letters. And here is the same Stepnogorsk, and Ukraine attacks with multiple of the vectors, pushing Russians a little bit away. Yeah, little by little, but gradually. And of course, the village of Mala Takhmachka, the fight there is still ongoing. Russians cannot occupy it to later on reach Orikhiv. It was their goal for already more than 2 years. It's very interesting to see the situation on the front lines. Well, Russia attacks, still, there are multiple of the attempts, but Ukraine gains more ground. And I believe in May we'll see also net plus for Ukrainian territorial gains. Or maybe equal, but Ukraine counterattacks not just in Zaporizhzhia direction. There are multiple of them attacks which are done by Ukrainian capable assault brigades. But now let's continue with the Russian military maps reviews. This one is published by Russian military blogger Rybar. He is associated with the Russian Defense Ministry, but he publishes more or less okay information. Yes, still more red zones for the Russian profit, but in general, if there is the evidence published, he shows some of the Ukrainian arrows at least. But of course, all of the small Russian infiltration attack attempts, they're colored like that. So the gray area is actually more wider than they show. And here Russians claim that Ukrainian counteroffensive towards Zhelezhnodorozhny was cancelled by Russian counterattack. So you see here the attack from all of the sides. Moreover, Russians went forward, expanding the gray zone in Verkhnya Tersa, or Verkhnya Tersa, if we speak Ukrainian. But at the same time, you see the Ukrainian attack vector, and they publish it here. This is the zoomed-in image from this square. Russians claim that there is the presence of Ukrainian infantry very close to P-85 road, which is critical for the Russian supplies. Well, at least Ternavata direction and all of those villages, they depend on the road, even though it's very close to the front lines, but Russians are still using it with heavy losses, but they try to deliver goods to their group in the northern area. And moreover, Ukraine has one more counterattack action towards the same Zhelezhnodorozhny, so 2 vectors. And if Russians went with the attack from Zhelezhnodorozhny, Ukraine has pretty much good chance to try to jam Russian forces. I'm not saying that it will be like that, but Ukraine still doesn't give Russians this full advantage. And even if we believe Russians and this Ukrainian counterattack, it was cancelled, still it was mostly conducted by drones, and I believe there were no significant losses for Ukrainian army. And Russia still cannot propel further from Ghulaypole. They occupied Ghulaypole the last year, I think it was autumn the last year. They were successful, but since that time the advancements are here and there, and they're unable to establish new bridgeheads. So in general, about Zaporizhzhia direction, I'm quite positive. My friends, just a short reminder, please press like to this video just right now while you're watching it, and also subscribe for the channel. My friends, those 2 actions, they help a lot to propel video in algorithms. And not just this video, my entire content. And obviously, if you can, you may support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below, or join membership of YouTube channel. Thank you guys, you are making this content possible. And now let's continue with the video. And this is Slavyansk-Kramatorsk direction, where Russia tries definitely to attack Ukrainian positions. The main fight will go for Rai-Alexandrovka. You might see several of the attack vectors of the Russian army from Kaleniki village. But the territorial gains of Russians, they're minor, and mostly they're expanding the gray zone. Actually, I thought that the fights for Rai-Alexandrovka could have been started a long time ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, but Russians are still unable to reach this village and to enter it. The fight is ongoing at the outskirts, and Russians are trying to encircle it from the sides, but the main obstacle for them in the future this year will be this river that goes from Slavyansk itself to Yurkovka. This is the substantial obstacle for Russians and also all of those rivers and lakes, and Ukrainian defense goes in parallel, main defense of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. The other defense line is the road T0514 that goes to Donetsk. Well, here also Russians even are showing that Ukraine is counterattacking, even in this kind of difficult direction where Russia has an advantage in its infantry use in those multiple small attacks. Ukraine also may reach some of their local success. There is the deep vector of Ukrainian army towards Babchi forest, and also Ukraine goes on counterattack towards Holubivka and Minkovka. Yeah, still I consider this direction as one of the most vulnerable ones for Ukrainian army, and Ukraine should concentrate its defense here. In this direction, it's all started from the town of Siversk, which was occupied by Russians the last year. Back then, occupation went swiftly for Russians, but also the kill zone was different. Now it's more aggressive, now it's more wide, especially for Ukraine. I think nowadays all of the Russian military bloggers are saying that Ukraine has an advantage in drone technology and in long-range and middle-range strikes. Wow, what we have here, it's the shame of the Russian army, the shame of the Russian military command, and I would say it's kind of the rare case that the Russian military channel tells the situation as it definitely was. Moreover, Rybar here had to correct his military map, because before he stated that Russians went to Borovaya, so Borova, that was proclaimed to be fully occupied by Gerasimov himself. So 3 days ago, Russians showed that evidence of their so-called presence in Borova, and this guy on the camera was telling, "We went to Borova, Borova is fully under our control, yay!" But Osins immediately told that it's all lies, and they were not in Borova, they were in Kolomychihai. Kolomychihai is this village in Luhansk Oblast. This is the border between Kharkiv and Luhansk, and Kolomychihai is being occupied since 2022. Yeah, already for 4 years. So this video was not filmed from newly occupied village, not from Borova, okay, it's understandable, but at least some sort of the small village, somewhere on the front lines. No, Russians were running there, over here, for purpose, just to film the video, just to present it as some sort of the evidence that they went to Borova. For me, this is kind of crazy, because it's the war of the 21st century where everybody knows what the hell is happening. And there are so many people on internet who are following this war very precisely, and every sort of the video could be confirmed, could be busted easily, every sort of the propaganda. But no, here they show their so-called territorial gains. The video with so-called Russian advancement to Borova was published by the Russian military channel Operativny Prostor. Here they show arrows and how they went to the settlement and basically took it. They even published the drone image, you may see it here. Definitely, this is Borova with multi-story buildings. As you might see, buildings are being damaged. Many of them were destroyed, and here you can see small households. And this is the cut. This is the cut, and they show presence of the Russian army. But this is the different video, which was filmed in Luhansk Oblast. This is theater, TikTok, yeah? Not just Ahmad battalion is filming that. Thanks God we are in Borova. And some of the small house, which are many in Ukraine, so it's hard to cross-check his geolocation. It could have been filmed elsewhere. But this image definitely confirmed that the village is not in Kharkiv Oblast at freaking all. This one is in Luhansk and was occupied for already very freaking long time. And just last Saturday, 3 days ago, by the time the video was published, Gerasimov also reported about liberation of Borova. By the way, I think this is General Kuravlov, general who received the Medal of Hero of Russia for liberating Kupiansk. And according to Russian official propaganda, official information, Kupiansk is still under full Russian control. Then at the same time, no any Russian map shows the presence of the Russian army there. Well, maybe just some of the gray patches, but Russians have not reported that they've lost Kupiansk, that it's been occupied by Ukraine, and Zelensky went there several months ago already. more than half a year, I guess. But for Gerasimov and General Kuravlov, everything is normal. He obtained his Medal of Hero for commanding the group of the Russian forces in that particular Kupiansk direction. Well, Russia lost Kupiansk and everything is normal with the high Russian military command. No one took even his medal out. No one has punished anyone. And the Russians at channel, some of them, they're desperate about it. They say, like, what the hell is happening? We have some sort of the corrupt, unpunishable military command. Yes, Russians, it's like that. But if we recall the story with the command of the, I guess, 14th Brigade of Ukrainian army in the same Kupiansk direction, they left several of the Ukrainian soldiers without supplies, few of those, across the Oskil River further away from Borova, so it was difficult to deliver them supplies and so on. But guys recorded the video, it went viral, and those commanders were dismissed. They're no longer commanders. Everything was replaced, guys were saved, secured, they were rotated, now they're on a medical treatment. So Ukraine has this mechanism of the punishment, really. If commanders do something wrong, there are the cases where they're punished. It's not fully working, yeah, the story just went viral, and maybe it happened because of that. But Ukrainian army is more on reforms compared to the Russian one. Russian army, with its military command, is completely rotted down, so it is unable to achieve victories. Only on map, and Gerasimov with the highlighter presents Putin more and more territorial gains.
Освободили населенный пункт Боровая.
Yeah, interesting. Borovaya was liberated by Gerasimov. Alright, let's continue with some of the changes on the front lines. Ukraine counterattacked towards Liman, that's the small village in Kharkiv direction. It's not the bigger town of Liman, there the fight is also ongoing, however Russians are not presented within the town. Nevertheless, Gerasimov reported that they've occupied or liberated 85% of that Liman. Well, here Ukraine goes and pushes Russia away from the territory closer to the Russian border. Let me show you the location. So it's here, small Liman, and Ukraine has liberated this forest patch with some of the settlement. Well, at the same time, Russians are also attacking here from their border. They went to Volokhivka village, a small one, but they managed to put their flags for some time. Volokhivka is the new attack direction for Russians before they concentrate their forces mainly in Vovchansk. Alright, we have some of the images coming from the front lines. Well, in this particular case with this Russian truck that was used for supplies, it is not from the front lines, it is well behind. Well, bikes, yeah, bikes are on the front lines. Artillery is behind as well. Some of the Russian... smoking is bad. You see? You go out, you've been spotted, you've been kaputted. And this Russian reminds me that I have a very messy hairline as well. Oh my god, yeah, I'm getting bald. I'm getting old and bald. Well, anyways, Ukrainian drone operators lighted up the cigarette for this Russian soldier. Hopefully he's satisfied. And yeah, tons and tons of the videos, I see that Russia started to lose more of the artillery systems, rocket artillery, air defense, so middle strikes, they're working. And Ukraine is not just using FP1 and FP2 drones, but also standard FPV. They look like standard, but they fly for the vast range. In some of the occasions, they drop from the mother drone, a classical airplane construction which is also used as a receiver and transmitter of the signal to those FPV drones. From what I see, they were not in use that massively before. I also might say that there are less fiber optic control drones. They're still there, but the fiber optics itself is very expensive, even for Russians, as they say. Russian volunteers, they're desperate because the fiber optics, it is coming from China, and China rose the prices by 5 times. 5 times, it's too much. Well, Ukraine has a better alternative in radio-controlled drones. Those are more robust, less vulnerable to electronic warfare, which Russia has. Oh, interesting. The refinery that was hit a few days ago by some of the drones somehow stopped its operation. It was reported by Russian sources and retweeted, let's say, by Reuters in their articles. The facility sustained an ultimate damage that doesn't allow it to operate any longer, and works are required, repair jobs. Russia needs several months, maybe for that, and Ukraine might send drones once again. The same goes for Russian Ust-Luga port, Novorossiysk, and other infrastructure. Ukraine daily is launching those drones on Russia. Even by the time I'm recording this video, there's swarms of Ukrainian drones flying, around 100 with something for this night. Well, not that significant number, you might say, but just imagine that number a couple of years ago. It would have been the most massive attack, but now it's something ordinary. By the way, this is Moscow region today. Something is burning there every day. By the way, there was no attack. The Moscow's volcano woke up. Well, actually, there is the storage facility, some of the warehouse. I think it belongs to Ozon or some shop, big one. It went on fire. And we have the comment from Zelensky about those long-range strikes. The new strikes on Russia approved for June. Ukraine will creatively develop its long-range sanctions on Russian territory, Zelensky mentioned. Very interesting. What does he mean with the word creatively? Creatively. I think May the 9th could have been very creatively, but Zelensky decided not to conduct that strike after he was requested by Donald Trump personally. Well, okay. Donny saves Putin, it is understandable, but I'm trying to figure out what else Ukraine might visit with the drones. Military airfields? Again, Spiderweb 2 operation? Could it be like that? Maybe, we'll see. In Russia there is lots of the very important and big infrastructure. Well, so far Ukraine has concentrated its efforts mainly on Russian oil facilities, refineries, ports, storages. To some of the other news, Putin has arrived in China for 2 days visit and of course important negotiations with Xi Jinping. Well, actually China helps Russia. They supply, as they say, not lethal military components, drone parts, and also recently the information was uncovered about the training of the Russian soldiers in China. Soldiers who might potentially operate FPV drones. The report was shared by Reuters. Russians currently trained by China returned to fight in Ukraine, sources say. So China, of course, is not our ally. Ukraine has to cooperate with China because components for drones, they're also coming to Ukraine via some of the organizations, companies, and even countries. But Ukraine is dependent on the Chinese production. Ukraine is also partially dependent on Chinese diplomacy. Even though Zelensky and the Ukrainian government sometimes they're harsh towards China, it could be, but they're not crossing the line to mess up relations with China. I think the last scandal, big one, happened the last year. Then some of the Chinese mercenaries who joined the Russian army were imprisoned in Ukraine. And by the way, they're still in captivity. There was an article published, I think, 1 month ago or something, and no one wants to get them back. So here Reuters says about 200 Russian soldiers have been trained, for now, in China bases. They're using modern simulators. The training included using electronic warfare and drones themselves. And also aviation and mechanized infantry in combat. Some of the Russians who have been trained in China have become instructors, passing on their experience to fighters, while others have later participated in combat operations using UAVs in Ukraine. Well, I think Russians, for example, in the Rubicon unit, they already have those skills themselves. And they may train everyone, including Chinese, but maybe China provides some of the new technologies and the training was to master that particular stuff. Some of the new systems they developed, and China, because it cooperates with Russia, they want to test those systems on the actual battlefield. So for China to later on potentially use it in their conflicts. Taiwan, who knows, maybe Russia itself. So Ukraine is like this test ground, also by the way for the Western weapon producers. Well, at the same time, United States are seeking to obtain technologies and intellectual property of Ukrainian drone interceptors at least. There's now a big drone deal in negotiation between Ukraine and the United States of America. We'll see where it goes, because Ukraine, I think, needs air defense missiles, PAC-3 missiles, which are very capable against ballistics, and Russia launches that every day. And it's impossible to intercept ballistics with those drone interceptors. But at the same time, United States, they need those small drone interceptors to be produced on their soil. Well, those drone interceptors, there's nothing outstanding about them from the technological perspective. All of them are 3D printed with some of the electronics and engines and controls, but altogether Ukraine was capable to develop this echo chain of the air defense systems, with drone interceptors. So coordination, how everything works. It's not just about those interceptors. It's about drone operators. It's about detection of the something flying in Ukraine, some projectiles, Shahed drones or cruise missiles, how to coordinate efforts, what to use to shut down particular thing. All of that is done by Ukraine very well. And the United States, they're looking for the similar stuff to protect their military bases in Middle East at least. Well, at the same time, the United States plans to shrink forces available to NATO during crisis. Sources say, it's understandable that the United States of America will not protect its allies in case of the further escalation from the Russian side, for example, against Baltic countries. As I continue to tell in my videos, one thing is that Ukrainian drone army was capable to stop Russian massive offensive in Ukraine, where all of those defense lines were built. Ukraine has already steady system, massive army. Ukraine is the strongest army in Europe. Well, maybe Russia is stronger still, because they have more resources and potential. But from all of the other countries, Ukraine is the strongest one. But NATO itself is no doubt the mightiest army ever created. But the thing that it's not that united, especially nowadays. We may heard from the rhetorics from the Donald Trump himself and also some of the NATO countries. There is the huge doubt that this organization would work well and respond on the real threat. And Putin might try to check it out with a small, kind of tiny special military operation where he might use several thousands of the troops. He has those, and he has drone-capable army compared to some of the European armies. So Europe should build its own army. Without it, there are huge risks, and the United States, rather than to supply military components, weapons, they will not help Europe. No, we shouldn't count on the United States any longer, at least with the current White House administration, and Putin knows that. That's why he has this window of 2.5 years to try to intimidate or provoke or to attack NATO. Trump's administration plans to reduce United States military forces embarked for NATO in a major crisis, signaling Europe should take more responsibility for its own defense. The change is expected to be announced to allies in Brussels on Friday, so in several days. We'll see, guys, we'll see. But of course, Europe has to rely on itself, but before, the politics from the United States was different. They told completely different stuff, that Europe will protect you, okay? Do not boost your military. But now they blame Europe for not investing in military. Well, things like that, guys. It's the world politics which went absolutely crazy. JD Vance, there has been no president who has done more to ensure that Ukraine survived the invasion of Russia than Donald Trump. JD Vance, you was just proud 2 months ago saying that United States canceled the military support of Ukraine, and I'm proud of it. He mentioned that. And now, what is in his head? An interesting remark from the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, I think it's her name, and how she describes the situation happening in geopolitics and the world order which is changing. I want you guys to listen to that too.
Today, all of us standing here on the stage believe in a rule-based world order, and unfortunately the old world order is changing rapidly and it's not going in the right direction, and therefore it is even more important than before that partners who really believes in democracy actually work together. And this is exactly what we have been doing today. It has been 4 years since we had our last India-Nordic summit in Copenhagen. We had a lot to talk about 4 years ago, and we have even more to talk about today. There is this idea growing right now that the middle powers in the world should act together, stick together, work together. We cannot say that India is a middle power. You are one of the biggest powers. It's not very easy to say that the Nordic countries are a middle power because we are too small to be a middle power. But when we are united, the Nordic countries, then we are a middle power.
So I guess everyone feels that the world is changing. Wind of changes is here. And Canadian Prime Minister told about it, Mark Carney, Frederiksen, Stubb, Xi Jinping, Macron. The world order based on rules as before, it is not changing. It has been gone. It's been destroyed, dismantled. First of all, by Putin, secondary by Donald Trump. Yeah, sadly, guys, but we have what we have, and is it changed for good? I hope so, but middle powers, they should unite in unions. And there is even the trend of uniting, which was previously was ununitable. Like, for example, Canada, could it be a member of the European Union? Then it's not the part of Europe. Well, logically, no, but they're very similar in their standards, in democracy. So there is more and more cooperation between the European bloc and Canada. It's just an example. So in the future, we'll see more of the unions, and Ukraine also could play a great role here as the security guarantee country. Oh my God. Ukraine was the part as an object in Budapest Memorandum that it was guaranteed its security by huge powers, United States, UK, Russia. But now Ukraine has something, this unique feature. First of all, its army and those drone interceptors, drone technologies, modern communication, electronic warfare. But the most precious resource for Ukrainians is the experience. Experience in the possible confrontation with the big powers like Russia. So Europe, of course, needs Ukraine because it's quite bureaucratic, and people there who live in Europe, they don't want to fight directly against Russia, of course. And Ukraine is like the shield now for Europe, and that's why Ukraine obtains some of the military support. Yeah, of course, we would like Ukraine to obtain more of the funds, but I'm sure that this support, it will continue because it's the existential thing for Europe to support Ukraine. No matter who wins those elections in some of the countries, like in general, the bloc itself, it is very decisive to support Ukraine. Otherwise, Russia may knock the door to some of the European country next time. And I hope that the unions like that will be created also in other parts of the world, like for example Asia, with Japan, South Korea, some of the other countries, Singapore maybe, Philippines. There is the real threat from the communist China, which is rising in its ambitions to take, for example, Taiwan. And it's not just about Taiwan, it's about providing its own influence. And just look at the Chinese investments into Africa. They basically bought local governments in majority of the African countries. This is outrageous. It has never been like that. But at the same time, we see that China, for now at least, it applies its soft power, bribes, money, blackmail. That is what United States tried to get rid of with the cancellation of the multiple of the humanitarian programs. I would say that the United States, they're destroying themselves. Well, not people, yeah, but Donald Trump. Donald Trump, his cabinet, his circle, they're doing everything wrong for the United States. And I'm just looking at everything of that, and I'm just shocked. China doesn't need to do a thing and just watch and enjoy with popcorn of what is happening across Atlantics or Pacific Ocean, depends where you look. So yeah, the situation for democratic countries for now, it's not that great, but I'm still positive. I still believe in humanity, in human freedoms, justice, and it should prevail. That's the nature. That is how it will be, guys. So no worries, we're just living in this turbulent time, and sooner or later, everything is going to be fine. My friends, it's all I want to say for today, and please support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below. You may also join membership on YouTube by pressing button join. It really helps a lot, and you are motivating me to film more and more of the content. I guess I film now 2 videos per day at least. Well, it takes my entire day, guys. This preparation, filming, etc., etc. So thank you so much for employing me on this job. I'm not complaining, of course. I'm very pleased to provide content for you. You're awesome, guys. And also, don't forget to press like to this video and subscribe for the channel. My friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.